welcome to another episode in the Rethinking Cyber podcast with me, your host, Rebecca McLaughlin-Easton. Today, my special guest is Robert Hannigan, the former director of GCHQ, the UK's largest intelligence and security agency. He's chairman of cybersecurity services firm Blue Voyant and a warden at Wadham College at Oxford University. Together, Robert and I discuss the next big leap in cyber defence, exploring AI and quantum, cyber innovation and public-private partnerships when it comes to protecting critical infrastructure and national security. Robert, it's a pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you for talking to me.
Well, it's very good to be with you.
Let me start by asking you, how can national cyber strategies adapt to the accelerating pace and unpredictability of AI-driven and quantum-enabled threats today?
Well, I think you're right, Rebecca, that this is a very fast-moving and it's a tough challenge for governments to keep up and to keep their strategies up to date. And I was involved in our first strategy here in the UK back in 2009, which seems like a different world altogether. I think the answer is to have sufficiently flexible frameworks that governments and regulators can move quickly in between legislation. So if you wait for legislation or major regulatory changes, that's just going to be too slow to keep up with quantum and AI, but also with all technology developments. So the ideal is to have a framework and then to hang off that secondary legislation, or different countries do it in different ways, but regulatory powers that can be agile and fast moving. I think that's the only way really you can keep up, as well as, of course, keeping abreast of the technology changes themselves.
And what new vulnerabilities and strategic opportunities do emerging technologies create for national security and critical infrastructure?
Well, of course, everyone is talking about AI now as the new opportunity and vulnerability. And certainly in cybersecurity, it's something that is hugely exciting because it offers all sorts of new defense possibilities for critical national infrastructure. But it also offers those same productivity gains, if you like, for attackers. We're already seeing AI used by attackers right across every sector, but including critical national infrastructure. So I think the short answer is that with AI, we need to ensure that we don't repeat some of the mistakes of the last 30 years that we made pre-AI, if you like. So not building in security at the start. And I think the challenge for governments is how do we make sure that the AI models and products we're all using are safe and secure? And that's a big challenge. So data poisoning is on the rise already. There's been some great academic research on how easy it is to poison data. And of course, AI is only as good as the data it's trained on. So that's my biggest worry for the future.
Speaking of governments, Robert, in your opinion, what must they prioritise today to maintain a technological edge in cyber defence and deterrence?
One has to be realistic about what governments can do. So what's the role of governments as opposed to the private sector? And we might come on later to talking about the relationship between government and industry. Governments can't do everything. The one thing they can do is some long-term improvement of the basic infrastructure. So you could argue that our whole cybersecurity problem is one of insecure software development over the decades. So we are all sitting and operating on an infrastructure that is fundamentally insecure because we didn't incentivize and regulate at the time to ensure that software and hardware was developed with security in mind. And so most governments now are thinking a lot about security by design, so designing in better security at the start and incentivizing companies to develop software securely. And many governments have already regulated and legislated on this. And that's a really important long-term thing that governments can do to raise the baseline. And governments are cooperating, which is great. So we're not going to have different baselines in every country. But that's one really long-term practical thing that governments can do to make sure that the future is more secure than the past.
What would you say as to how nations can best move from reactive defence to proactive resilience in cyberspace?
So I think you're right, Rebecca, that resilience is the thing we are all looking for, because we accept that attacks will sometimes get through, however good our defenses are. And with the CNI in particular, that can be very disruptive. So how do we build resilience? Well, I think if we look at the example of Ukraine, the Ukraine government managed to keep functioning and to deliver services to its citizens under this incredible onslaught from outside, both physical attack and cyber. How did they do that? Well, primarily through the use of cloud and through good preparation in the years before. And so it didn't bring down the entire government network once there were attacks on their core infrastructure, because they had invested in cloud, a thing which probably governments would have shied away from 5 years ago even. But there is a huge resilience built into the use of cloud services and preparation. Clearly, Ukraine government had done several years of very careful preparation internally and with external players, big companies, and they were ready for things to fail. And that is the core of the problem. You have to assume that everything will fail at some point. And how do you build the resilience to cope with that?
Robert, you touched upon it earlier with reference to government and industry. Coming back to that, in what ways do you believe that public-private collaboration can really enhance deterrence and speed up collective responses to cross-border threats?
So I think you're absolutely right, Rebecca. This is the core of the whole thing. What makes cyber different is that governments can't protect everybody. We expect our governments to protect us in sky and sea and land. That's why we have military forces. It's different in cyberspace because, first of all, it crosses borders, it underpins everything, and most of it is owned by the private sector and operated by the private sector. And it's the economy that's reliant on it. So governments have to work with the private sector, with industry. And I think that's the key to success in getting that relationship right in a joint effort to protect the economy. If you don't do that, then you're left with governments trying to protect everything, which is just not possible.
Just an additional follow-up there, and looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, what is the landscape like in prospect for these partnerships? How receptive are both government and industry, and do you see us moving in the right direction?
I think we are moving in the right direction, and governments are doing great things. So I think GCF is a great example of bringing together all the different players, and that makes a big difference. But also the big cyber incidents. So we've been looking here in the UK at Jaguar Land Rover, of course, taken offline for some months, unable to manufacture, to the point where not only did it sustain huge losses, but those losses actually affected the national income, according to the official National Statistics Agency, in September. So the fall in car production affected the UK economy. So when that sort of thing happens, I think it just reinforces to both sides that industry has an interest in working with government, and government absolutely has an interest in making the economy more secure. So I think it is heading in the right direction. It's slow and it's difficult because there are a lot of players. And of course, criminals and attackers are more agile than we are very often. But it is, I think, going in the right direction.
You referenced the JLR cyber attack there. Many analysts calling it the costliest, the most economically damaging in UK history. Isn't it a shame that it takes events like that to really strengthen the resolve of both government and industry to work more closely together? It should be irrespective and independent of these events, don't you agree?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, every time there's a major cyber incident, that's a blow for all of us, actually. And it shouldn't take that for us to get better and to take this seriously. And most companies are taking it seriously, to be fair. There are still some way behind. And it's maybe these jolts that help boards to decide. And I understand the pressure on boards, particularly at difficult economic times, to invest in cyber. But if you don't invest, you're really shooting yourself in the foot, because if you think things are difficult now, add a failure to operate and several £100 million losses, and things get a lot worse.
Absolutely. Lastly, Robert, as automation and AI continue to expand at a rapid pace, how can we truly ensure that human expertise, ethics, and adaptability remain central to cybersecurity?
I think that's a great question, Rebecca, and it's something that I spend most of my time thinking about. I'm based here in Oxford University, and everybody here is obviously powering ahead with AI research, but we're also worrying about, well, where does the human fit in generally? And that's true in cybersecurity too. So we know we need to automate for speed and for productivity gains. And that's really important and that's going really well. But we will need humans in control of this. So the key is to work out what can machines do and what can humans do to oversee that, particularly as we move towards so-called agentic AI on a large scale, where we're basically delegating to AI agents decision-making powers. But I think we need to be absolutely clear about what the parameters of decisions are and where humans can intervene. And I suppose the golden rule for me is that humans have to understand what is happening. So that's true in cybersecurity too. If it's a black box where you don't really understand what the technology is doing, that's bad news. You need to have human beings who actually understand what the models are doing, whether it's in cybersecurity or anything else.
And there we have to leave our conversation, but it's been fantastic to talk to you, Robert. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Rebecca. Great to talk to you.
I hope you enjoyed hearing from Robert Hannigan, the former director of GCHQ. For more episodes in this series, just head to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also follow the Global Cybersecurity Forum, GCF, online for updates. But for now, thanks for listening and goodbye.